Everybody does things sometimes that they know create problems and that get in the way of the good things they're trying to do in their lives. And I call these self-defeating behaviors. Things like losing your temper at work, or flaking out on people who count on you, or overeating, or staying in a bad relationship that's grinding you down. They're just a few examples of self-defeating behaviors. Now, if you never did these things, your life would be better, but the reason you do them anyway is usually because of an emotion. I talk about this in my Healing Childhood PTSD course, how there's a trigger, an outside event, that sets off a very strong emotion, and the emotion unleashes the behavior that you don't want to do. So trigger, emotion, self-defeating behavior. Now, triggers are going to happen. A lot of people try to make triggers go away, but the triggers are caused by, the world. It's other people. It could be a loud noise. It could be that someone criticized you or rejected you or ignored you. It could be that you felt embarrassed about something. Anything could be a trigger, but the trouble is, you can't really control whether triggers happen. They happen. They're outside of you. If you only focus on triggers at the beginning of the sequence that leads to your own self-defeating behaviors down the line, you're just running around spending all your time trying to make other people comply with what you want. So, that's where you get people who are like, don't talk about that around me. Don't ever be late with me. You can't really control other people like this. You can ask. We talk about this. You can ask people, but you can't really make the world stop triggering you. If you have triggers, it's going to happen. If you try to control people, they'll push you away, and then your triggers get worse, right? So it's not a good way to control your own behaviors, is trying to control other people and whether they trigger you. Instead, you'll have a much better time focusing on your emotional response to triggers. If you recognize when you're going into one of the emotions that I call the big three, the ones that put you on a slippery slope towards self-defeating behaviors, then you buy yourself some time to actually prevent the behavior that tends to follow. Or you can minimize it at least. Maybe it's smaller. Maybe it's less often. So you focus on the big three emotions. All right, so what are the big three? They are feeling overwhelmed, feeling lonely, and feeling fearful. Now, everyone feels these feelings sometimes, but if you've done something you regret, chances are you were feeling overwhelmed, lonely, or fearful. Now, you're probably wondering about anger. And yes, it's definitely there, but I see it as a secondary emotion that rides in on the other core emotions of feeling overwhelmed or alone or scared. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So strong negative emotions are initiated by a trigger, and they result in a behavior. Something happens, the feeling floods you, and you feel, maybe numb, like you flew out of your body, or you feel a big rush of adrenaline and your heart's pounding, or you get hit with a sudden rush of emotion. And this can be scary because on some level you're about to self-sabotage, but it's really hard to do anything about it at that point because the strength of the emotion and the need to express it just feel like too big to stop. Have you ever had that happen? There's a trigger and a huge negative emotion wells up, and then you say or do something that hurts your relationships. This is a terrible cycle, very simple really, that allows past trauma to turn into ongoing struggles in your life. Trigger, emotion, behavior, trigger, emotion, behavior. Let's go back to those three troublesome emotions: feeling overwhelmed, feeling alone, and feeling fearful, all right? So everybody has them. In non-traumatized people, the feelings go up and then they gradually come back down. So the feelings can be processed, and if there's some action that needs to be taken, they can take time to figure out what that's going to be. They calm down, then they can take sensible action. All right. But with childhood PTSD, these feelings of fear and loneliness and overwhelm can just go through the roof, and they keep rising. Have you had that happen? And this is part of what's called emotional dysregulation. If you have this, it's not your fault. But the problems it causes are now yours to deal with. So emotional dysregulation can be like drowning, like having the air sucked out of you. And it can lead to those secondary emotional reactions like rage and panic. And it can be hard to bring the emotions back to an acceptable size, a size that doesn't terrify people around you and cause you to get fired, right? That extra strong factor in your emotions is because your nervous system is having a stress response. And with CPTSD, you might call it like a overreactive stress response, a dysregulated response to stress. So if you take a brain scan of someone who's calm and mentally regulated, you'll see lines flowing together in, kind of a parallel fashion from different parts of the brain. But when you're triggered and your brain becomes dysregulated, those lines, they start going in a zaggy pattern. And similarly, the variability of your heart rate, which goes like this, it goes out of sync with your breathing, which normally rises and falls with your heart rate. But they go out of sync. And that's what it feels like when you're panicky, getting discombobulated. You overreact to something stressful and can't seem to get a grip on the reaction. Your mind is all over the place. Your emotions go higher and higher till they feel unbearable. And this is when very bad things can happen. Because you might feel this sense that things are dire. That's what your nervous system is telling you. Now, it has to happen now. It's urgent. You have to yell. You have to feel like you're doing something about the problem, or else you're going to explode. Or you have to beg the person who's leaving you, please don't leave, because it feels like you will die. Trauma is coloring your perception here, isn't it? When you're feeling this overwhelmed and this terrified or this alone, your negative impulses kick in to temporarily feel like a fix. So there are 3 negative impulses that set off self-defeating behavior, and they connect roughly to the negative emotions that we just talked about that get triggered in childhood PTSD. So overwhelm will tend to go into the urge to escape. And aloneness becomes an impulse to cling, to hold on. And fearfulness becomes an impulse to control. So escape, cling, control. And if you're like most people, you probably have one of these. That's your dominant impulse when you're under stress, but most of us have all 3 in some measure: escape, cling, control. And this is tough because the behaviors that get triggered by these impulses are where 80% of the damage from childhood PTSD take place. It's not all from what happened to us in the past. It's not from the triggers or the feeling we're experiencing per se, but it's from our behavior right now in response to that and the impulses that drive us into that behavior. And this is not easy to face. I know that. It feels safer sometimes to focus on what happened, what other people did, how sick they were. And compared to facing our own self-defeating behaviors, talking about other people and the past and feelings, that's kind of like a comfort zone. It's out here. But your own actions is where it totally matters now. What will you do to either hurt your life or change your life for the better? And a lot of people with childhood PTSD instinctively know this is the big question, but we lack insight about, what exactly is the problem? And for you to develop good discernment about that, what's the problem, what needs to happen to change it, you will need a safe way to look at what even is a self-defeating behavior, okay? So no pressure to change anything right this second as you watch this video, but I'm going to share with you my list of common self-defeating behaviors. There are, plenty. You don't have to take notes on this. I will give you a link at the end of this video for a PDF that you can download and use at your own pace and take notes on, and see how you're doing with your self-defeating behaviors. So here are some common self-defeating behaviors for people with childhood PTSD. Number 1 is black and white thinking. Traumatized people are often attracted to extreme views and groups and authority figures. Now, maybe you are outraged about current events, and I'm sure you have your reasons, but if it's consuming you, it could be a self-defeating behavior. You might be arguing with people about your opinions, and it gets too heated, and it's damaging relationships, it's damaging your reputation. Or you might find yourself tangled up with mentors or friends who dominate you. There's that extreme, out of proportion power dynamic. Maybe you're the dominant person. Maybe you're putting people into hard categories of these people good, those people bad, and you're cutting off contact with people outside the people you consider good. Those would be examples of black and white thinking. Number 2 is neglect of your body. Now, money could be why you have just one pair of beat up sneakers. I've had just one pair of sneakers before, one coat, one pair of sneakers, rainy season, always wet, big holes in them. I didn't have a lot of money at that time. That was money. But you might have also not been taking care of yourself. That's another reason why you might be kind of disheveled in tatters. Maybe you haven't been to the dentist in years. For a lot of people with childhood PTSD, it's a little more than just being poor. You're suppressed or diminished in the clothes you wear. You're suppressed or diminished in your ability to do just basic hygiene or to exercise. Something traumatized people do is avoid doctors and preventive care sometimes. Things have to get really bad before you deal with it. And sometimes for some people, it's too late at that point. All right. Number 3 self-defeating behavior is addictive use of food. And this includes everything from carrying a lot of extra weight to eating disorders to, having a love affair with sweets and high carbohydrate foods that make you feel exhausted because you ate them. These foods can feel really calming for a moment when you're dysregulated, but in the long run, they make you more dysregulated. So if it gets to the point that it's making you sick or brain fogged or exhausted, it's a self-defeating behavior. Okay. Number 4 is the addictive use of media and entertainment. It seems like almost everyone has this problem now, watching too much TV or browsing the internet or playing games so much that you're not getting enough sleep, or you're losing your daily routine or your job or face-to-face connection with people, or it's eating up your funds. That is a self-defeating behavior. Number 5 is dishonesty. And this includes things like exaggerating, hiding important personal truths or preferences, lying, stealing, cheating on your significant other, tax evasion, any kind of illegal activity. All right. Number 6 is work problems. And in that category, I would put staying stuck in a job you hate, not working when you could work and should work, overworking, or having more than your share of conflicts with employers and coworkers, things like suing or getting sued or acting in a way that makes coworkers feel scared of you or humiliated. All right. That's not uncommon with childhood PTSD. Number 7 self-defeating behavior, blame. And this includes having a hard time seeing your own role in problems. It's victim thinking, it's bitterness, it's casually saying things about other people that hurt their reputation, which is slander. It's also called calumny. That's when you say things with the express purpose of harming someone's reputation. It's very wrong. Believing that all your problems are because of, racism or because of sexism or foreigners or one or another political party or economic system. A lot of people who think they are above all of this and have the answers are having a trauma reaction. That's, they're like literally thinking they're above others, up and above. And they're quick to call out other people's shortcomings and declare the solution. We have to do more to make people change the way I think they should be, and that kind of thing, when they often have glaring problems of their own. All right, number 8 is numbing with substances like alcohol or drugs. How much is too much? You are going to have to be the judge of that. But if it's interfering with your energy level, your focus, your relationships, your finances, it's probably too much, okay? Number 9 is irritability. Maybe you get angry sometimes for no reason, or you get into arguments more than your share. You get road rage. You yell at the TV. I have a relative who once shot a gun at the TV, ruined the TV by shooting it. It was so mad about something. You might see comments online that are so hostile. It's just, it's raging. Or customer service calls. Do you ever get triggered by those where you're getting the runaround or you're even losing your temper at people face to face? In the extreme, this can include like a total rage attack that's like, life-threatening. It can lead to violence. Number 10 is an attraction to troubled partners and friends. People who were abused or neglected as children are often attracted to people. They feel more comfortable with people who were themselves traumatized, including people who have high levels of drama and addictions and conflict and serious legal and financial problems. All right, it's a self-defeating behavior to glom onto that. Number 11, unfulfilling romantic life. Now, maybe you avoid dating anyone at all, even though you haven't made a decision to end that part of your life, or you stay in bad relationships where there's no trust or no love. You may be telling yourself you do this to avoid getting hurt, but it borders into a form of romantic anorexia. Have you heard of that? Social, sexual, emotional, romantic anorexia, an avoidance of those things. That brings me to number 12, which is the abuse of your sexuality. And this can include an overly sexualized appearance or being inappropriately seductive. As a result of your upbringing, you may even have a distorted sense of the messages that you're sending with your behavior and poorly developed boundaries. That is so common. Maybe you have affairs that would badly hurt other people if they knew, or you generally feel humiliated by how you're treated, and you keep seeking out that person anyway, as if you can set it right somehow, if you could make contact or get them to hear you, or you feel ashamed of your own behavior and you can't stop it. That's a self-defeating behavior. Number 13 is fantasy. And I know, that fantasy is considered like a positive thing, but it can also be a self-defeating behavior. And that includes romantic obsession, including limerence. That's obsessing on someone who can't be with you or, who's rejected you or maybe isn't even in your life. But it's gotten to the point that you're not living your life or connecting with people because you're very attached to this idea of somebody else, maybe searching online, for possible signs that they feel the same way about you. Fantasy can also be about money and career success, where the fantasy is so consuming that it takes the place of any actual work or action steps that would help you get where you want to be. And in the extreme, it can go so far as stalking or delusional thinking. Number 14 is avoidance. And this symptom is so common among people who were traumatized as kids. It can be overt when a person avoids connecting with people, or accepting responsibility or participating in groups. But it can also take the form of covert avoidance. I made that word up, and it's for when a person appears to be, that you might be married, you might go to a job and hang out with everybody, you go to parties, but you never really connect with people. And there's like a big gap in terms of accountability and commitment to them. So that's covert avoidance. And then this is kind of where avoidance takes the form of social, sexual, and emotional anorexia. All right, debting. While financial hardship can fall on anyone and can and has, and financial stability isn't always guaranteed, debt can become a self-defeating behavior when you're living beyond your means to pay for a place to live and transportation and clothes and recreation. Trauma can interfere with your ability to consistently earn a living or to accurately gauge, like, how big a threat is it if I spend down the available money I have this month? Like literally there are brain changes for people who are traumatized that make it hard to assess the risk that brings on. So you get this gambling-like behavior. And in some of its worst forms, debting can turn into a gambling addiction or an unsustainable get-rich-quick mentality, and it can lead to foreclosure and bankruptcy and ultimately homelessness. Number 16 is a habit of repeating traumatic patterns, and clinicians call this repetition compulsion, where you find yourself in a relationship with a partner or some friends who have similar dysfunctional behaviors to your parents. Now, I don't believe this is done intentionally. I don't think you're trying to recreate your childhood, but people with CPTSD can develop a blind spot around red flags and others that, when I've done it, I've sort of experienced it as sort of like going blank and then marching right into the problem. It's not like a decision to have that problem. It's not conscious. And you cannot deny that we so often end up with people with problems that match the problems of our parents. So even when the signs are there, that someone you've allowed into your life is creating trouble, you may have a hard time setting up a boundary. And you'll experience this as a feeling of disappointment and surprise that, oh my gosh, once again, you're with someone who's sick and unavailable or dangerous or what have you, whatever your pattern is. And it can make you vulnerable to emotional hurt and physical and financial and social harm, right? You don't want troubled people in your life like that. You're trying to go somewhere good. So people who hurt you, you can consider them always a setback to your healing. Okay, so these are the main self-defeating behaviors. If you're ready to change, it helps to get acquainted with the list, identify maybe one problem you'd like to work on. Don't try to do a million things at once. Maybe don't even try to do 2 things at once, just one. And then find support to take positive actions toward changing it. One way you can do that is to learn to calm your triggered emotional reactions that push you toward the behavior you're changing. When parents treat a child like they're worthless and tell them that they're no good, it can plant that evil, self-sabotaging seed in them that even if you fight it and you rebel, it can drag you down. Sometimes it strikes you all at once. Sometimes that self-sabotage comes and gets you in 100 little decisions that you make. And it can go on for so long and get so entwined in the way you live, in what you imagine is possible in your life, that it can be hard to see that you forgot who you are. You forgot who you were meant to be. My letter today is from a woman I'll call Margie, and she writes, "Hey Anna, I grew up in a home with 2 sisters, one a year older, one a year and a half younger, and the classic alcoholic father, anxious codependent mother dynamic." All right. I have a pencil. It's not the fairy pencil today. I lost it on my trip to Arizona last week. I'm getting another one, but for now it's just a pencil. All right. As a kid, Margie says, we had the money to go on vacations, but we never did. My mother always voiced her disdain for wanting to go anywhere. She didn't have to with my father, even if it meant we didn't go as a result. We went to a Catholic elementary school, and I distinctly remember never having clean, pressed clothes or even my hair kept. I feel like my mother's focus was always on either my father, herself, or survival. My sisters and I remember hearing her stay up late after we had gone to bed, waiting for my drunk father to walk through the back door, and then she'd start crying about how he didn't care about anyone but himself, or something along those lines. You could tell he didn't give an F, and she would do this on a weekly basis, waiting for him to come home from a night out partying to tell him how badly he was treating her, only for him to act cold and uninterested. This is the kind of thing that sets up a pattern. All right, during this time, as a young child, I do recall fantasizing a lot. I would go out in the alley on my bicycle and ride up and down the length of it, dreaming of a make-believe person who I was supposed to be and what type of life that person had. And this continued through my teen years and through the very early parts of my early 20s. And I always imagined myself as a woman who had far more capabilities. And I should mention, I'm going to circle that. I circle things on the first reading just so I can see the gist of it, and then I'll come back and talk about what I've been noticing in this letter. So Margie says, "I should mention that through my childhood, my father berated my sisters and me, mostly older sisters and my older sister and me, by calling us stupid, foolish, no smarter than N-words. My mother never told me I was pretty. Out of my 3 sisters, I was the one who never heard this compliment. She would say that she never gave it because she didn't want me to get a big head and turned out to be stuck on myself." Oh dear. By the time I got to be 18 years old, I got into stripping and doing private parties, bachelor parties, divorce parties, golf outings, etc. And before long, I got introduced into the world of being an escort, a call girl, if you will. And she says, "I met my daughter's father through this way of work, and we'll call him Armand. Armand has pretty much always been soft, kind, and patient and forgiving with me. I didn't intend to start a family with him. At first, I figured I could parlay this into a sugar daddy thing so I could get away from the late nights and having to sleep with so many different men for money all the time. But as time went on, his kind nature grew on me and it developed into an actual romantic relationship. And it's important that I add one of the major things he kept from me during this time was how he made his money. He was into some sort of identity theft / fraud and was in the United States illegally. He also had a toddler son back in his home country who he stopped flying over here. It turns out he was never honest with the son's mother about our romantic involvement and didn't want her to find out, so he was avoiding having them here altogether. I never expressed my disdain or discomfort for any of this. Instead, I just told myself to pull back emotionally, and I even started to work as a call girl during that time again to get back at him, even though he was never made aware and I was the only one being hurt in the situation. Fast forward 2 daughters later, Armand has been locked up as of 7 years ago and deported as of 4 years ago. And my daughters and I speak to him fairly regularly by FaceTime and the like. He sends no financial support. He's not even working and hasn't been since he touched back down in his home country 3 years ago. I've told him I will wait for him to return because I feel I owe it to my kids. I also feel like no one will ever love me the way he did. He stood by me through serious ailments. I have ulcerative colitis and lost all my hair once. I've been hospitalized many times, and he knows about my past but still accepts me as lovable and beautiful. I know I'm selling myself short here, and I want to not do that anymore. More than anything, I want true love with someone who I'm not trying to manipulate in the beginning. I want the vulnerable. I feel like I never was with that. I was never vulnerable with Armand. I fear because I'm 37 years old, 2 kids with my history, it's such a faint possibility. I desperately want companionship and ultimately marriage. I know this is getting long, but something very important to add. I have a sugar daddy now. I've had this one who I'll call Mark, and since 7 years ago when my kid's father first got arrested and incarcerated. I only work part-time as a retail associate, and I've never made much money outside of using sex in exchange for it. I feel like without Mark providing me a monthly allowance or income, I would never be able to survive on my own. I enjoy working part-time as it allows so much time for my kids and me together. Plus, I get overwhelmed so easily, and I feel a full-time schedule would do just that. I was recently incorrectly diagnosed with ADHD, I believe, she says. I would love your insight to this matter, Anna. I've found myself in limerence with a crush on a guy at work, and it's making me miserable. I want the real deal. I don't want to go on living like this. I know I should have much more. I just need the steps to get there. Please, I'm ready to do the work. And she says, thank you, sincerely, Margie. Oh, gosh. All right. I think I can help. There was a lot to circle here, and Margie, I'm so sorry about the way that you were raised. I can just see it. When you were describing your parents, I read your letter first, one time through, and when I read it again, preparing to record this response to your letter, I was just like, oh my gosh, look at that. What your parents said to you, like, not just that you weren't pretty, and I know that that's an important validation we get, but also that thing about your mom hanging out every week, sort of going into some, I don't know, borderline reaction or something where she wanted to wait for your drunk dad, or she just couldn't put it down. Like, that's what he did. He would go out and drink and come home drunk, and she would wait for him to get into the big fight with him about it. And that was her emotional outlet. And it's so sad. And I'm really glad, like, you're not in that kind of a situation right now. That's something, right? But also this thing that they said to you where your dad said you were stupid, foolish, and no smarter than N-words. Unbelievable. I can't help but feel it, Margie, that somehow that got inside, and a little bit you're thinking that too about yourself. And that's why you think you can't have like an ordinary life. I was a single mom for 9 years with 2 kids. And so I'll just be a role model for you. You can put your life back together. And I totally get it that with your past, it's a thing and not everybody can accept it. But that doesn't mean that this guy who's in another country not sending money, that's not the best you can do. You didn't mean to start a family. It turned into an actual romantic relationship. You didn't know what he did. And that's kind of what a person with complex PTSD, that's what we do. We stay fuzzy because instinctively we kind of know, like, if I know that, I can't really stay in good conscience. Like, that's not good. And of course that affects your daughters. I'm just here, I'm not here to scold you about it, but I'm just here to validate, like, it's not good that they are so separated from their dad. It's not good that what's going on in your life, in your energy, in your self-concept is this belief that you have to have sex for money in order to survive. I don't believe that's true. And I know it's hard, like, especially if that's what you used to do. Now, there's this whole culture out there. I've heard it all my life, really, because where I live in Northern California, everybody tries to be so cool about everything, but they call it sex work. And they go, oh, it's like empowered, it's a choice, and it's not. There's almost always sexual abuse. There's almost always a history of abuse. And when there's prostitution or pornography, I'm going to come out and say it. It's harmful to all parties, and it wouldn't exist unless people had been abused and damaged by sexual abuse. And there it is. It does terrible damage to people who consume it. And when I was dating, I could tell a man who had been using a lot of porn. And I knew people who visited prostitutes as well. And their whole energy was so messed up until they really healed from what happened. You know, once it's done harm to your life, I don't think there's a 50-50 solution. Like, there needs to be like a massive change where it is renounced, that it's renounced, and you do the work to recover the sovereignty of your own being and your self-sufficiency, that you do not need a sugar daddy. And I know that throughout history, you know, lots of people have had to do this. Lots of people have had to do it to get through rough times. But what you're doing right now is you're doing it in all times. And so you are 37. This is a beautiful age to give yourself the time to go into personal development time, right? And especially for your daughters. This is not something you want to pass on to them. It would do them so much good to witness what a woman looks like when she's getting free, when she's getting up on her feet, when she's learning how to earn her paycheck, even if it means you guys are all living in a one-bedroom apartment. The dignity of being able to earn your own money and only have sex with somebody for reasons of love and commitment is going to be such a wonderful thing to demonstrate to them. And it can transform to this situation faster than you think. And I know you wrote to me, and I know you wanted to hear what I had to say, but I just really urge you to put this down, just renounce it. And you have the part-time sales job, and I know that you need that time with your daughter, but you need development. Like, retail sales is a notoriously difficult way to make money. I've been talking about money a lot. For people who were traumatized and want to change their life, like getting stuck in a minimum wage job, it's a very difficult road. There's dignity in it, but for progress in your life, and especially for raising children, it's time for you to get your education. And I really, I don't even know, I think you're in the United States. In the United States, in your state, there are programs that help single moms to make these changes, that provide some support. I know it's never enough. I know it's really difficult. I know it takes a lot of energy, but you can begin to, pave your path to start walking out of this trap that you're in, of being stuck, unable to get your own money, and to be free of men who exploit you. All right. So you said, I don't want to keep living like this. I know I should have much more, and you should. You deserve so much more. You deserve to breathe free air, to have that freedom, and to feel wonderful about yourself, for your accomplishments, for your intellect, for your grit and your courage, for being able to change your life as you have. It's not your fault that you were abused when you were a kid. It's not your fault how it affected you and how that sort of took place. But now you're the only person who can start to walk yourself out of it. I'm going to encourage you to get involved in a 12-step program. And one program where there are women who have been involved in sex work is Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. And there are women's meetings where you can have friendship and fellowship with women who get it, who are supportive and accepting of you, and you can begin to work a free program. I'm really a fan of free things. It needs to be free, right? So free help to begin to start changing your life and to identify and change the self-defeating behaviors. Because it's not just that top level of what's going on, of how you get your money. There's stuff underneath that about how you feel about yourself, things that need to be rooted out. And the 12-step programs are very powerful for that. If you take them seriously, you go to a meeting. Don't ever use meetings for dating. That's called like pooping in the, what is it? I don't know. It's a metaphor for don't mess it up. Don't mess up this sacred space where you're doing your healing, and you need to trust people and be safe. And the other thing that you can do for free is my daily practice. And these are the techniques that I had so much self-hatred and difficulty in feeling like I can't do it, I can't change. And the daily practice, just day by day, has helped me just take a little layer off, take a little layer off, take a little layer off, and start to become my full and real and empowered self. The most damaging part of having childhood PTSD, and at first you think it's what happened to you when you were small, and yes, that was bad, but the part that really holds you back in present time is the self-defeating behavior, the many behaviors that you're still doing as a result of the wounds that you're still carrying, as a result of the neurological dysregulation and the hurt self-esteem, the problems connecting with people and knowing how the regular world works. You put those all together and self-defeating behaviors come out. And I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. Which behaviors are common for traumatized people? Like, you might recognize a few of them. And then I'm going to ask you to stay with me all the way to the end of the video, because I'm going to describe to you what it's like when those self-defeating behaviors have lifted. What's on the other side of them, and it's good. And that's what happens when your trauma is healing. So don't worry that you have to be perfect. Don't worry that you have to be 100% healed. There really is no such thing as that. There's a groove that you get into through having good tools to recognize and handle the emotional and neurological symptoms that come up as we go through the day, and also through having a community of supportive people. And I'm going to talk in this video about how to find that for yourself. Now, when you have tools and support, your healing can accelerate. Do you need to take some actions to get this accelerated healing going? Yes. You need intentional action. You need courageous action. You can go slowly if that feels better, or you can go faster. And I think for me, the decision to commit myself to my own healing process happened when I recognized my own self-defeating behaviors. That was it. That was a really powerful turning point for me, because until that time, I'd focused so heavily on what happened, the abuse that happened, the neglect, the bullying from other kids and siblings, and ostracization from groups and adults in my life. Those were traumatizing. But I just found I couldn't do anything about what other people had done in the past. And if I could recognize the stuff that I was doing in present time, that was something worth working on, because it was something I could change. And to be honest, early in my healing, I really was not clear what I was doing to cause problems. I just knew I was drowning in problems. So I want to start with a list of self-defeating behaviors that might be helpful for you to go, oh yeah, I do that. And knowing what these are isn't so you can beat yourself up, but as you listen, you might identify one or two that if you healed these, even if you don't know yet how to heal them, it would make a huge difference in your life. So take note of that. And then, not to end on a discouraging note, I'm going to go through what it looks like when these very problems are healing. And I guarantee you, you will recognize some of these signs of healing in yourself. No matter how far along you are, they're already happening. So we'll get to the signs of healing, but we'll start with the self-defeating behaviors. Okay, here we go. Number 1, neglect of body. Now, this could be avoidance of medical and dental care, or even harming yourself. It could be wearing inappropriate or shabby clothes. It could be having poor hygiene, or it could be neglect of, just exercise, food that you need, just normal stuff that is hard to put together when you are in active CPTSD symptoms. The second one is blame, and this is the difficulty seeing your own role in problems. It can be like victim thinking. You can't see how there's any possible way you could have done it differently, or maybe next time, and it results in like bitterness, slandering other people. It's a belief that all your problems are the result of a certain person, a certain event, a certain country, a political party, a group of people. You hear this all the time. It's all because of men, or that's a group of people, right? So that would be blame. Number 3 is black and white thinking. Traumatized people are often drawn to extreme views, groups, authority figures, and belief systems. And a sign of this is if you are constantly being outraged at someone in your life, at the news, that kind of thing, like you're always like at 9, Black and white thinking costs you the freedom to disagree or step back from conflicts with other people. You end up dominating other people, slandering them, cutting off contact with friends, family, people outside your group, where there really was hope. But because you are in black and white thinking, there is nothing that can ever be worked out. Number 4 is numbing with substances. And traumatized people aren't the only ones who do this, but we have a statistically high rate of substance abuse and addiction. Now, you may be trying to relieve stress with alcohol or drugs, or maybe taking more or different medication than prescribed. That is a self-defeating behavior. Number 5 is doing this with food, eating addictively, binging on food, especially carbohydrates, not eating enough, or obsessing on how you look, or how much you weigh, or what you're going to eat next, or the correct way of eating. And that has a name, by the way. The obsession with correct way of eating is called orthorexia. It's on the rise. Number 6 is addictive use of media and entertainment. And this is when we use TV, social media, internet, and games enough to interfere with sleep and meals and our daily routine or family responsibilities or work or school or their ability to make a living. And by screens, I also mean these things, right? Oh my gosh. Walk around a public place and just see how many people are looking at their phone. I've noticed it's maybe about 50% at any given time. Weird, huh? Number 7 is dishonesty. And this includes exaggerating, hiding important personal truths or preferences about yourself from other people, lying, stealing, cheating, tax evasion, illegal activity. All right. 8 is work problems. And this could be very broad. This would be if you have, let's say, a chronic adversarial relationship with your boss or your coworkers, or if you chronically stay in unfulfilling work. I mean, there's so many problems you could have at work. It's part of, it's definitely part of a self-defeating behavior. If you're under-earning, if you're neglecting a healthy need for learning and skill development, if you have unusually long or frequent periods of unemployment, or maybe you have a pattern of suing your employer or thinking about suing them or getting sued by them, this could be a trauma-driven pattern. Okay, number 9 is irritability. And things like frequent arguments, falling out with friends, neighbors, partners, family members, ranting, flying into a rage, road rage, mistreating people, taking revenge, or actually committing violence. Number 10 is an attraction to troubled partners and friends. And this is so common for people neglected and abused in childhood. What this looks like is being repeatedly drawn into relationships that turn out to be abusive or controlling or damaging to the other relationships in your life, or to your family or to your finances. And this attraction to troubled people may also be in play if you find yourself claiming that everybody in my life is abusive, or everybody in my life is a narcissist, for example, but you stay with them and rationalize why that's necessary. That would be a self-defeating behavior. 11 is being in an unfulfilling romantic life. Now, maybe you've had no dating relationships, or you've stayed in a bad relationship too long, or you've created or stayed in a loveless partnership. That would be a self-defeating behavior. But another one could be called abuse of sexuality. And this includes using an overly sexualized appearance or conduct to the point that you lose your dignity, or you get into situations you never wanted to be in, and your emotional security and your ability to be real around sex and relationship dynamics starts to get damaged. It includes doing things that you don't want to do or that make you feel ashamed. And people with childhood PTSD have a higher than average rate of, for example, unwanted pregnancy, and a higher than average rate of compulsive behaviors around sex. So that's definitely a part of trauma. The next one is an addictive use of fantasy. And this could be around your career success, or more commonly around relationships. And it includes fleeing reality. When things are tough, you just go right out into the fantasy, not really being here to solve problems or listen or talk things out, not being in touch with reality. Fantasy can lead to a failure to take reasonable action and to have huge unrealistic expectations and make huge unrealistic promises. You inflate the importance of relationships and events and personal attributes and prospects. At the extreme, it can become obsession. It can become stalking, and it can lead to a neglect of your health, your work, and your family obligations. Number 14 is the avoidance of people, responsibility, and participation. Now, this includes isolating, becoming what's called socially anorectic or avoidant, or covert avoidance, where you technically participate in things or accept invitations, but when you're there, you don't connect. Everybody's at arm's length. Some people do this as individuals, but some people do it as a couple or as a family or as a group, or like a cult is an example of this, where there's a disconnection, an avoidance of connection with the outside community. 15 is deading. And this means living beyond your ability to pay for things like your home, your car, the things you do for fun. As it gets worse, you might get into gambling, your debt growing and growing, and problems like foreclosure, bankruptcy, homelessness. And for traumatized people, debting often goes hand in hand with just kind of a vagueness about, what would be the path to solvency? What is the amount that they spend? Vagueness. So 16 is repeating traumatic patterns. Maybe you have a seeming inability to detect trouble or step back when trouble shows up in your life, or you relapse into a traumatized state again and again and again, triggering deepening of depression, rage, collapse, reversion to old behaviors. And you can see how, a traumatized person can't always help this happening, but I'm just saying it is a behavior, and if it's happening, it is holding you down. The reassuring thing is that these are all common and normal symptoms in people who were traumatized as kids. And if you have these behaviors, you're normal. And unfortunately, now that we're grown, no one is coming to save us. It doesn't matter how accurately you can figure out why these behaviors took root in you. What matters is that you unroot them. Some of it is hard, some is easy. Some takes time, but some can change very quickly. And you'll find that if you can change one thing, then that creates this little space where another thing can change, and then another, and then another. And that is how healing happens, with tools and support to take one good action after another. What tools can you use? Well, maybe you have some already. 12-step programs, therapy, my programs. You can click on the links below my videos, all of them. You can find the programs, including my free course, The Daily Practice, and the free calls that go with that. You can always join me in that. At the end of this video, I'll remind you to click on that stuff. But the most important thing I want to share with you is the vision of what it can be like when these behaviors heal. Now, I didn't think I could possibly heal from my childhood PTSD, but now I'm here to tell you how I did it. And in this video, what it feels like, what changes when that healing happens. How will you know? Are you ready? All right. These are the signs that your trauma wounds are healing. Number 1, when your trauma is healing, you will no longer tend to see things in black and white terms. People, yourself, and situations. You will no longer hold them up as all good or put them down as all bad. You'll begin to appreciate the complexity of things and the way that people can have faults, but they can be decent people anyway. You'll have less outrage and more curiosity. You'll have less impatience and more persistence. You'll lose the attraction to extreme views and authority figures, and you'll gain the ability to interact with a variety of people. Relationships where one person dominates the other one, they'll just get more equal, or they'll fade away. It will be less necessary to cut people out of your life. Number 2 is you'll have a natural desire to care for your body, in part because you're going to have less drama in your life, and you'll have more energy to do things like take a walk, floss your teeth, shop for clothes that look good on you. I still find that hard, actually. I don't like shopping. But you will feel a little better. Now, when you find yourself feeling too schlumpy to leave the house or too tired from watching TV until 1 o'clock in the morning, that you feel like, I can't do anything, it'll just come to feel like that pattern is not worth it anymore. You will want the things that having energy brings. One little step after another will lead to more clarity, more enthusiasm for your life, and a desire to do even more good things for yourself. Number 3 is you will naturally crave healthier food. And being at the effect of past trauma can lead to all kinds of food problems, obesity, malnutrition, eating disorders, and it can lead to a tendency to deal with stress by binging on carbs and sugar. Oh, they feel so relaxing at first, right? But they're dysregulating in the long run. They don't feel good. They're draining. And as you heal, you won't want that feeling. Number 4, you'll lose that compulsive desire to binge on screens, including TV and video games and just plain looking at your phone all the time. If your screen time has interfered with, your sleep, your meals, your work, your ability to be present with your loved ones, then the release from addictive behavior will be life-changing for you. Moderation actually feels kind of good after a while. Number 5 is you're not going to be tempted anymore to fake the truth. Things like exaggerating, hiding important information about yourself, or lying about things. It's not going to be necessary. You won't need to, or because you're not going to feel ashamed of yourself. You're not going to have so much to hide. Eventually, you'll have nothing to hide. It's all worked out. Being honestly yourself will feel good. And when you're not being real, you'll start to have real discomfort. You'll actually want the truth to filter through your life. And if there's anyone still in your life who can't handle who you really are, you'll feel more acceptance that they might just no longer belong in your life. The people who leave your life will leave a nice little spot where other people who love and accept you can come in and be your friend. Number 6 is your work life will start to go better, and you won't stay stuck in unfulfilling work. You'll change your relationship to your current job, or you will get a new one. You'll have the power to do that. And if a lack of work has been your problem, all the good changes that are happening in the rest of your life are going to make it easier to get work and to earn money that supports you and the people who count on you. You're going to know how to steer clear of exploitative or abusive employers. That won't just keep happening over and over again for mysterious reasons. You'll lose your appetite to be in conflict with people on the job, and you're going to get the ability to show up, to do good work, to be an encourager of your coworkers, to be, to enjoy that cooperation and that teamwork, and then also to advocate for yourself and your own ideas and getting credit when it's appropriate. Number 7 is you'll lose interest in assigning blame to yourself or other people for problems and focus instead on just finding good solutions. You're going to feel less angry. You're not going to be so irritable. And when something is your fault, it'll be so easy to just own it and say, I'm sorry. And when someone else owes you an apology but doesn't give it to you, which is most of the time, don't dwell on it. You won't. There's no need. It doesn't affect you so much anymore. Blame-filled talking, gossip, news, social media posts, it will just start to feel bad. It puts a bad taste in your mouth. People in your life may not know why, but they'll feel better about themselves when they're around you. Number 8 is any attraction you once had to unavailable partners and troubled friends will just let go of you. You'll be released. So much life damage is done by these self-defeating behaviors, connecting and bonding with and staying with people who are trouble. Avoiding any kind of intimacy with people at all, even though it's what you long for, or abusing intimacy by acting out sexually, which is still a way of having no intimacy, by the way. These are also part of CPTSD that can take persistence to change. But when you've made real progress in the other areas, it will be easier to stop re-traumatizing yourself in these ways. The spell gets broken. It is like that, right? It's like being under a spell. Everything seems so real, and then poof, you see the truth. So then what's left is peace. Peace when you're single, and the possibility of harmony and real love when you do meet someone. Number 9 is you will start to prefer reality to fantasy, and the tendency to check out by spending too much time in limerent, obsessive fantasy relationships or fantastical business success ideas is really common with people in the middle of trauma. But in the end, that fantasy level, that much fantasy, it's just another way to avoid real problems and the actions that need to be taken. When you're healing, it feels less necessary to go into fantasy. And when you catch yourself daydreaming, you can come back to the place where true connection and pursuit of your dreams is really possible, which is right here, right now. Number 10 is your material well-being will improve. Now, most people in the world, including most happy people, live good lives without being rich and famous. And, most of the world lives on very little money at all. Financial hardship can fall on anyone, but when you're free of trauma, it's more possible to earn a steady income, to stay safe in that way, to let go of get-rich-quick schemes, and to live within your means. That takes a high level of consciousness, doesn't it? You can release the fear of the past when, if you're like many of us, you may have been just a few $100s away from homelessness too many days of the year. I've been there. It all gets better when you're healing. A little here, a little there. You could sleep at night. You can handle the hard days when they happen. You can hold your head up even though you make mistakes because you're not sabotaging yourself in ways that make you ashamed anymore. This is what healing feels like when you're not re-traumatized all the time. So don't get discouraged. There are things you can do to start your healing right now. Microcheating is the word for things a person does when their partner isn't looking, that they're dishonest or secretive about. It's things other than a full-on affair, but the key is that it's outside the commitment that the couple has with each other. And when partners find out about microcheating, they feel betrayed. And yes, it can be a real threat to the stability of the relationship. So can a couple recover after one of them has microcheated? So much depends on what the context was, what the commitment to each other was, and how well each of them can meet in the middle with real change on the part of the cheater and faith in that change on the part of the person who was betrayed. My letter today is from a man I'll call Ray, and he writes, "Dear Anna, there's a lot I could share here, but I want to focus on the struggle of rebuilding trust. I'm a 27-year-old man and have been with my current partner, a 26-year-old woman, for about 2 years. I've got the fairy pencil. I'm going to circle things I want to come back to on a second reading. But let's go through and read Ray's letter and see what's going on. Our relationship is passionate and enlightening, but we have been struggling with trust for a little over a year. We both have a history with CPTSD, heartache, and trust issues, and I've said and done some awful things, including insulting, lying about past relationships, microcheating, and generally risky behavior. I've since changed my tune, going sober as well as attending therapy and watching your videos, and opened up transparent communication with my partner. She's a lovely woman who's basically everything a man could desire, but at times she makes it difficult to move past the hurt I've caused. For example, we will argue about whether or not microcheating should be the same as cheating itself, suggesting she shouldn't even be with me at all if we can't agree. For the record, I don't disagree with most things she believes. I just believe not everything can be wholly black and white. When I've made suggestions I should let her go, she considers it weak of me and that it confirms her worst worries. Sometimes she goes so far as to dismiss any changes of heart or claims I make, even when all evidence suggests the contrary, because it's within her rights and feelings to do so. Forgiving is hard, and forgetting is even harder. But we've both acknowledged I'm not a bad person. There are times when I feel like I'm not able to suggest a viewpoint that reminds her of what's happened between us, without her accusing me of sort of relapsing into old opinions and habits, neither of which I'm interested in. We're giving it until couples therapy, but I'm worried that the damage I've caused has already made it pointless. Please help me, crappy childhood fairy. I want to spend my life with this girl, but if the damage is too much, I'll just leave her be. I'd rather avoid the heartache if all I'm doing is pressing down on a wound." So I had a few clarifying questions for Ray about his definition of sober, relapsing, and microcheating. And I emailed him and he messaged back, and this is what he told me. He said, A, per going sober, I cut off edible consumption once we began serious dating. Drinking off the clock after work was a new big issue where I wouldn't tell her I was drinking. One instance, I had to crash at a coworker's place to find an Uber because I got stumble drunk. After admitting to her I lied and had one drink by myself after work after telling her I'd stop, I stopped putting myself into scenarios where I'd be encouraged to drink. No formal AA meetings for me, just better habits and curbing impulsiveness. It's been about 6 months, and since I had a drink without telling her, I only drink now if she's with me and the urge is largely gone. We both come from alcoholic and depressive families. I've been juggling the idea of AA as well. B, I microcheated by lying to her about a coworker I had had prior feelings for and whose photos I liked on Instagram. It shames me to point it out, and I certainly abandoned any sort of romantic interest once me and my partner were seriously together. But keeping that history, which was not very long, away from her was a breach of trust. I'm a very monogamous person, and I was going through a very stupid, casual point of my life that I now recognize as being harmful to my emotional well-being. The person has since been blocked on socials, and I no longer engage in behavior that is remotely considered flirtatious or risky, such as going out for drinks with the opposite sex. When I say she feels like I'm relapsing, it's if I give an opinion regarding consumption, and you don't say of what, or risky behavior that does not take accountability for what I've done. So she'll insist I haven't learned anything, rather than just making a neutral stance on something such as saying, casual hookups aren't for me, but I understand why someone might do them. I'm justifying my prior poor decision-making in her mind. I would say the crux of the issue is that although I make constant efforts to be truthful and communicate, she still doesn't believe me, and will even go so far as to say she already knows the truth. It's been difficult trying to convince her logically or emotionally that I've changed, and I know I have to be patient, but how much effort do I have to put in? Am I not doing enough? Is she not doing enough? All right, sign from Ray. All right, Ray, this is a challenging one. Yeah, interesting. So first I'll tell you that if I just went straight off information, it's like, yeah, she sounds like she's very paranoid. You straighten the whole thing out. And normally I only take the point of view of the person who wrote me a letter. But in this one, like, you're trying to win her back. You're trying to win her trust back. And so I just sort of like took a look at how do I feel when I'm in her shoes. And I don't feel like you're totally free of this stuff you've been doing. And I'll walk through your letter and I'll tell you why. So I think that's what's setting her off. You don't quite seem that you've renounced it. It seems like you're doing stuff that you're supposed to do. You're trying to keep her happy because you don't want to lose her. But I do feel the energy that you're still a little bit tethered to these options that you have. And you're talking about spending the rest of your life with her, in theory, forsaking all others. And it's not from anything you said. It's just kind of in the way you worded things and the way it was sort of carefully. You said consumption. You didn't say what. You said sober, but you didn't. What you describe as sober is not sober. You're not sober. And I'm not scolding you. You get to drink whatever you think is appropriate. But some of your ways that you've put this, like the concrete example, didn't match up with the description. So that's what I would say. I'm nitpicking on you because I'm trying to find out why she doesn't trust you. And so I think there's more that you could do to build back trust. And it has to do with, you're saying you're being transparent communication, but I feel like there's some honesty missing. And you don't owe me to tell me, oh, what drug are you doing? Or when you say risky behavior, you didn't say risky behavior what? Like driving 100 miles an hour, not using condoms? I'm not really sure what you're talking about. And it matters. It matters for, me trying to assess like what's going on here. Are you not doing enough? So I feel, that's my feeling, that you're holding something back. All right, let's go through and I'll tell you why I think so. All right, so you both have a history of CPTSD. You both have had your hearts broken. You both have trust issues. And then you say, I've done some awful things. And so the way that you say you've done awful things, they're pretty awful what you say here. Insulting, lying about past relationships, microcheating, and generally risky behavior, which is vague. And so I don't really know. It's hard for me to understand. And the fact that you're not concrete about it, it's fair because I'm a stranger to you, but I can't really assess, like, how bad is that? How serious is it that you've done these things in the past? So you explained to me about microcheating, and you explained about lying, and you had a thing with this coworker, but also there was this thing where you said you stayed at the house of a coworker because you were stumble drunk and you were lying about it. And I'm just wondering, is that in any way connected to this woman who was the coworker who you once dated and you lied about? There's like lies to do with when you hang out with your coworkers. I think I see you compartmentalizing that a little bit when the issue is really like, and I don't think you don't get it. I just think somehow it feels like you're not fully forthcoming, like you haven't renounced this stuff. And you don't have to, by the way. You can let go of this relationship and just keep living the way you want to live. But I could understand how a partner if this was all they had to go on, which I know it isn't, but it wouldn't be enough for me either. It just doesn't feel like you get it. This is the thing about apologies, and you're not really asking directly about an apology, but gaining trust back, it's contrition. It's saying, I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry how it affected you. I'll never do it again. It's an apology, basically. And I think we can all instinctively sense an apology that isn't real. That is, I'm sorry you were hurt. I didn't mean to hurt you, which isn't really an apology. It's like a really good apology is where you go, I did this, and if that had happened to me, I would have felt this way, and I realize it made you feel that way, and I feel so terribly about it. I hope you can forgive me. And to do that, you really have to be able to nail what it is that's bothering the person, what it is that hurt them. And I'm guessing, like, she just keeps saying you're not, she says, she thinks you're lying still. She thinks you don't get it. She thinks she already knows the answer, even though she hasn't let go. She does sound like she's in a pretty bad place with it. It might be impossible for her to get her trust back. But if you want to try to save the relationship, that's what I recommend. So then you said, she thinks here she's kind of tripping, where you say, okay, I'll let you go if you are so distrustful. And then she goes, that's weak. She wants you to fight for her. She wants you to fight for her. She wants you to just like lay down and fight for her. And maybe that's honest for you and maybe it's not. So, but that's what I'm hearing there. It's weak of you. Come on, fight for me. Don't just tell me I should leave. Yeah, that hurts, doesn't it? When somebody's like, yeah, well, maybe you should leave. So sometimes she dismisses your changes of heart. Yeah, she's not feeling it. She doesn't trust it. Maybe she's being neurotic about it. Maybe you've done everything you can, but I'm gonna just take her side because I know you have to win her back. And if you're gonna win her back, you've got to hear her. You've got to hear her and see what you can do about her concerns. And when you said, I want to spend my life with her, but if the damage is too much, I'll just leave her be. I'd rather avoid the heartache if all I'm doing is pressing down on a wound. I think I can hear what she's saying about the lack of fight there. There's a lack of a fight there. It's almost as if, I don't know. Yeah, there's a whiff, not a direct thing, but a whiff of like, well, if it doesn't work out, at least I can go back to my old ways, right? But see, I'm reading your mind, and I'm sorry for doing that. I've got to do my best here to just kind of guess what's going on. Okay, so then about getting sober, you said, I cut off edible consumption. I'm not sure what you mean, like cannabis gummies or something? Once you began seriously dating. I'm not sure what you're talking about there. And you say edible, but you don't mention other forms that somebody would ingest drugs. So that's not sober. Drinking off the clock after work was a new big issue where you wouldn't tell her you were drinking. And once you got stumble drunk to the point that you had to lie in Uber, and then you admitted to her that you lied and had one drink by yourself after work after telling her that you'd stop. So I don't think you want to stop drinking. I think you're not drinking to make her happy. And I don't think that's going to hold. The center does not hold on that kind of a decision. Like if you want to keep drinking, if you feel like that's okay for you and you enjoy it, that's okay. But it's evidently, it's become an issue in the relationship. So then you say, I stopped putting myself in scenarios where I'd be encouraged to drink. So that's often what newly sober people do. And sober means you really don't drink. You don't drink at all. You don't use intoxicants at all. Not like just when she's there or just on Sunday or anything. It means you renounce it. You're done. And, we all know like people who become sober sometimes relapse, but the intention there is to live free of those things. And the beauty of getting sober, I learned my daily practice techniques from a sober woman in AA. I'm not in AA, but she showed me how she managed to not just get sober, but to get like happy. Because there's a lot of people in AA meetings who are grinding it out, like, gritting their teeth and like not drinking, but not happy. And she showed me the techniques she used to actually get happy within AA. And I then showed hundreds of people. And then I created Crappy Childhood Fairy. Like I used to hang out in AA meetings and I drank heavily as a youth, as a late teenager person in my 20s. But it really wasn't a thing for me and I could put it down anytime. I'm definitely not an alcoholic, but it got to where I wished I was because I related so much to the alcoholics, to the people, it was probably the CPTSD, to the people who needed a program every day to like set their lives right, who needed a path shown, who needed a sponsor, like somebody to be like, here, this is what I require from you. Get honest with me about this. And it was this lovely experience hanging out with them. And to me, like, if you qualify for AA, why would you not go? And there will always be people in the comments who are like, no, it's terrible, it's exploitative, somebody hit on me, it's religious or whatever. But, it's like the best thing in town. It's the party I always wished I could be invited to, of people being honest, of people working on themselves, of people who are also pretty effed up like me. It was cool. Terrible place to, try to look for dates. Sometimes that happens, but what I would say is a sincere effort to work the 12 steps is a very powerful, life-changing thing. And once you have done that, once you've gotten at least through 9 of the steps, your perception, your understanding of what the problem is could completely transform. So one word of advice from me to you is, you have a drinking problem. I don't know if you're an alcoholic. Maybe you don't know. But the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop. And if you actually have a desire and you would like to experience not just dryness, not just not drinking and avoiding places where people are drinking, or only drinking in front of her so she won't be scared, but actually like releasing this shield that, we put up with substances or whatever it is that we use. For you, it's the drinking, maybe the, sort of extracurricular relationship stuff in the past, that it's a shield you put up against the anxiety of life, against the just, the horror show of it all that it is sometimes. And that it's possible to have an even happier, more peaceful life on the other side of that. And the people in AA can teach you how. And so I would encourage you, check that out, get a sponsor, work the steps. And when you've gotten at least through the 9th step, and different sponsors will take you through faster or slower. It's up to you. I would just go for it. Like, try to get to the bottom of like, what's the exact nature of your wrongs? That's embedded in one of the steps. And you get in touch with that, and you write it down and you share it with another person, and then you spiritually ask to have it removed, and then you get busy making amends. So that's, where you get honest about how you harm people and you apologize to them. That's the 9th step, the apology itself. So what you've done with your partner here is, without AA, you've done a lot of this, but you didn't have tools, you didn't have another person guiding you. I'm so glad you're going to couples counseling. I hope they're a good counselor. I hope they can help you with this and get to the bottom of it and give you their professional opinion. But whatever they say, like whether this relationship works out or not, it's like you and your spirit are working out something very hard right now. The fact that you're doing this stuff tells me there's a lot of pain and conflict and trauma wounds in there that are driving you and messing up your life. And that can be healed. That can be healed. And so this would be the perfect time to go do it. You could work all those steps in a few months. Certainly the original people in AA, they did it overnight or in a weekend. You could do that too. But rushing it just so that you can get through it and say, here, I can make a decision. That's not the way. You want to be thorough. You want to, and I've done 12-step stuff for many years, and there were times when I was phoning it in, and there was times when I gave it every cell in my body, wanting so badly to have clarity of the reality of my condition and to somehow, without knowing what to do about it, change. And that is what I got out of it. And yeah, that's pretty good, huh? I don't know anything else like that. And it tends to work for people who get really into it. And I don't think everybody can manufacture being into it. Being into it comes from crisis, which, if you value your relationship, it's coming, buddy. It's upon you. And even if she acquiesces and you guys get married and stuff, this issue isn't going to go away. This issue of trust, you can't really settle it by getting married. I know about that too. So then you said, so you were lying about drinking, and there was something to do with women. And so, yeah, this is really common stuff. And it's always, always going to create havoc in your life, to be dishonest, to be throwing away the integrity of your relationship for a high, basically, for a buzz, whether it's the booze itself or the woman adoring you or whatever that is, that if that's your drug, you will go back to it. That's kind of how it works. Unless there's what they call in AA, a psychic change. It's a profound change, and it was Jung who called it that. But people who, there's a dramatic change that comes over some of us sometimes. And before I had words for it, it happened to me. And my whole orientation in life, like, really changed. And I just became deeply interested in, how do I get more honest? How do I cut the crap? How do I take care of the mistakes I've made? Finally, I could feel the harm I did. Like, I actually had sensitivity to that, rather than, a story I'd tell myself, or numbness, or, forgetting. And I could feel it, and it concerned me gravely about the way that I had hurt other people. And I just got really interested in trying to resolve that. And I went through many permutations. It's an ongoing process. You can have it all your life. And it makes you a deep and wise person. So I guess I'm singing the praises of, like, actually getting into recovery, actually being sober. Now, in AA parlance, sober means you're not drinking and you're going and working the steps with a sponsor. Dry means you're not drinking, but you're not doing the other stuff. And so you're not even dry. You're trying to cut back, I would say. You're trying to control. There's this beautiful chapter, this passage in the Big Book of AA, where it talks about how, the hopelessness of, being hopeless over your drinking. And every alcoholic usually goes through something where they switch out beer for wine, and hard liquor for beer and wine, and weekends only and never weekends, and only weekdays and only alone and always alone. And, just like, and everybody laughs in an AA meeting when they read this, because it's just so true. And, like, all of us who are clinging on to what we believe is sanity and safety, to something that's not working, that other people disapprove of, go through the same thing. It's like, how about this? How about this? How about this? And there's this incredible, like, freedom and release when it's just like, how about none of it? And it does involve, becoming dependent, drawing your power from a higher power, and recognizing it doesn't have to all be you. So this is radically different than what you may be doing right now, or what I see reflected in your letter. You're appeasing, you're limiting, you're hoping, you're preparing for the worst. It doesn't have to be so terrible. I encourage you to check it out. And I encourage you not to fraternize with women there, so long as you're discerning this relationship. And when you have gone through that process, you'll be, I used to tell people that I sponsored, don't make any major decisions until you're through the 9th step. You don't really know what your major decision is. We're driven by many things. But when you've really done a thorough process of, like, facing all the fearful, resentful stuff inside, which my daily practice can help you do, by the way, I learned it from these beautiful AA people. When you're regularly just facing those, releasing them, apologizing, setting things right, meditating, providing service to other people, when all that's going on, you can see your own problems so much more clearly for what they are. And some of them are worse than you think, and some are nothing at all. And that's good news. It's going to be okay, and it feels really good to face problems. So I would encourage you to check that out. When you say you were going through a very stupid casual point in your life, I don't know, this thing where you weren't in a relationship. Before you were in a relationship, how you handled yourself is fair game, right? She doesn't trust you, and I'll just sort of validate, like, I don't know, somebody who has casual relationships and still feels like, well, I don't see what the big deal is, except you don't like it. There's an attachment there. I think that's the thing I sense in you, that you still have this little tiny thread tethered to that way of life. Like, you need it there. And buddy, I know what it's like to need an escape hatch. I spent decades of my life never really committing to anything, never really getting real about anything, wanting things, pursuing things, getting upset with people, having children even, but I had never really made a commitment. I did, the children are what did it for me for the first time. I really, that went through and through. I was wholly committed and remain, like, I just love my kids so much. And that was one part of my growth, but it was more spiritual growth in the 12-step environment that turned me into somebody who was capable of making a commitment to marriage, which is so huge. My mom was married 3 times. And I see why the first ones didn't work out, and I see why she loved her third husband. It was hard for all of us. It was just how it was. Like when I was growing up, it was how it was in a lot of families. I didn't know what a big deal it was to get married, and I didn't know what a big deal it was to get divorced. And I learned through experience. And so I just think, like, if you're entertaining this idea of committing the rest of your life to this person, possibly to have children as well, that you entirely get to the bottom of this and you get 100% real about who are you really? What do you really believe? How do you really want to live? Like really, without reservation, without hiding anything from yourself. You know, you may or may not end up telling her this. The reason you would, if you ended up saying, you know what, I just don't think I can be who you want me to be, that might be honest. Or if you say, you know, I really have reflected on this more and I totally understand why you didn't trust me. And here's what I'm doing. And here's what I see I did wrong. And here's what I'm going to change. And here's how much time we have, you know, whatever time you're willing to give for her to see how it goes. And, you know, to give her that level of serious consideration that this situation deserves. If she still can't accept you, well, you have your answer, right? But I think due diligence to really get to the bottom of this in the deepest way possible and to be literally willing to change your life, not because it makes her happy, but because it really is your calling. Like that, how many people have gotten married or gotten sober, you know, and just been because they don't want somebody to leave, right? And people who don't want to get sober don't tend to stay sober. So imagine if you were married and then the truth comes out, you just can't do it. You're still lying, you're still doing whatever you do, you know. That's no good. You don't want to be that person. I know you don't. Now you're being called into total honesty with yourself. And, you know, there happens to be a free program to support you with that. You're also utterly welcome in our membership program, where we do a lot of work of a similar nature, but not on alcohol specifically. When people have that, we really encourage them to go to the program that's for that. So if you want to try my daily practice, this is a way that anybody, including you, Ray, can put your toe in and begin to process all this fear and all these fearful and resentful thoughts that are clogging up your thinking, making it hard to see the truth, making it hard to know your own heart, making it hard to understand what is called for here. You can use my daily practice. I have a free course. You can learn and try it in less than an hour. And once you take it, there's also FAQ videos, 25 of them, to show you the nuance. I mean, I've been doing this 30 years, and then you'll be invited to join me. I do every other week, I lead a Zoom call. It's usually an hour and a half, 2 hours long. We use the techniques together and I take questions. Hundreds of people come from all over the world and it's beautiful. It's like all these people, we're all getting free. We're all like waking up and we come out and we talk and everybody's eyes are shining. You can see it on Zoom. It's lovely. So you'd be most welcome to join us, as would anybody watching this video, but you got to take the daily practice course first. That's how you get invited. And if you sign up for the course and you don't learn the techniques and you come to the call, you're going to be flummoxed because I don't teach the techniques there. I teach them on the videos in the course, in the free course. And then you come and we do the techniques and I'll answer your questions.